I love that I'm smiling right now because I love that there is still joy and euphoria to be found in this experience, even though the world is telling us that we're wrong, that we don't belong here, that we shouldn't be who we are. I'm just talking about it and I'm getting excited as I'm thinking about these stories. So they have not taken away my joy and my hope. I am still empowered in that space, and that feels amazing. If you're learning how to love yourself, in a way that feels so true. If you're figuring things out, I see you. Hey everybody. I don't even really know where I want to start this video because in some ways I don't know how much longer I'll be able to create content like this. As always, I'm recording these things off the cuff, so I'm still kind of finding my words. I have never stopped feeling imposter syndrome whenever trying to engage in these conversations, even as I wade more into that space and start to become known as that being my brand of this is what I'm talking about. But it's still something that I'm so nervous about because it is such tender and touchy subject matter. When I first started this whole content creation journey, I wanted my platform to be one of queer joy and gender euphoria and optimism and hope, to inject that into everything that was going on in the conversation. I felt like I brought a certain, spirit to it in that way. And to continue to try to be that brand in these times has led to a lot of mental gymnastics. I wish that I could just be sharing movie reviews, TV reviews, theater reviews, and gushing about great media. Like, I wish that could just be all that I was doing with my time and with my platform. Because I have so many movies and TV shows and theater productions that, I want to talk about and I want to go see and then tell you guys about. That's what I want this space to be. But I think because my queerness is the lens through which I see everything going on, it was impossible to not have that impact the way that I was discussing the importance of queer and trans media and diverse storytelling and all of that. And as there has been more and more legislation and particular focus on queer and trans kids and the way that segment of the community has been vilified or made to feel like they are wrong or confused or need to be fixed in some way, I started to engage a little bit in that conversation, talking about the importance of visibility for queer and trans stories, for kids and teens who are going on these identity journeys and trying to figure out who they are and trying to find safe people to talk to about the things that they're discovering about themselves. It's so important to have that. It's something that I did not have. One of the reasons that I feel like I could only claim my queerness later in life was that there was terminology that either did not exist or wasn't mainstream enough to where I would have found it at an age where it could have provided me with a sense of security and identity. And I think I've also really latched on to the queer media that's there, that's telling these coming of queer stories, things like Heartstopper, which I'm obviously going to talk more about at some point on here because I love that show so much, and I think it's one of the most important shows of our current time right now. So I've been very focused on almost like giving younger MG, the things that I wish that I'd had when I was that age, in the things that I'm promoting, the conversation that I'm trying to engage with, and even my own sort of creative things that I've done, because I have started to write again. I've had a lot of different ideas for scripts and things that I've started to channel into actual work. And it feels amazing to be in that space where I feel like I am providing the content that I wish existed in the world. You know, there's a lot of pressure on that, but at the same time, it's a privilege, and it is very fulfilling to be in that space. For a lot of people who are coming to their queerness later in life, you know, we feel like there have been moments in our lives where we've thought that we sensed something, that there was a queerness or a transness that we identified with, but because we didn't quite fit that label or we didn't quite check that box, then we couldn't claim it. And so I think there's something so beautiful about claiming this notion of I'm still figuring things out and that's okay. And I feel like those of us who are on a gender or an identity journey where we haven't landed on labels and pronouns and even, you know, a name that really feels like it's who we are, we're still inhabiting that gray area, that beautiful, magical gray area of figuring yourself out. That segment of the community who's just starting to feel valid, who's just starting to explore things that are making them feel real, and they're getting to know themselves, getting acquainted with who they are, which is something that should just be so beautiful, and everybody should be able to move at their own pace. And it's something that I have taken pride in, and I've tried to encourage other people to move at their own pace and not feel like they have to rush into anything. Like they can kind of try on things and see how they fit, and they are welcome to change their mind at any time. I think there's something so amazing and important about giving people the space to figure that out for themselves and giving them the freedom and the time to do so. The fact that I could claim my queerness and claim the ongoing gender journey that I'm on as a valid identity gave me such a sense of relief and peace. However, my biggest worry in engaging with conversations about queerness and transness and those communities and those identities and those journeys has been that I'm not queer enough or trans identifying enough or gender non-conforming enough or non-binary enough to be accepted by those communities and those conversations. That's always why I've been hesitant about talking about it. In having that be my main concern, I didn't realize the bubble that I was in of the community that I grew up in and that I still exist in, which is very welcoming to queer and trans people, so that it didn't even occur to me to be worried about the more conservative or right-wing aspect of the population and how they would respond to it. Like it just didn't even really cross my mind. And I recorded a video about Wicked. And one of the things that I talked about in that video was this notion of how so many of us are like Glinda and Fiyero in that we don't recognize our own privilege until our bubble is burst. And I think both Glinda and Fiyero are great representations of these, you know, privileged people who don't even recognize their own privilege. And when they are shown that there's other ways of being, they have a decision to make, and they both kind of go different ways with it. And now, in talking about the importance of giving people the space and the freedom to do things at their own pace, at their own time, I've really been relishing that. But it's also meant that I am moving at a slower pace than some other people might have been. And now, with the new legislation that's being proposed, I'm realizing that some of these things that I had not yet decided if I was ready for or wanted, some of those things may not be available to me in the very near future, or they may already not be available to me. I'll give you an example. I've been very behind on renewing my passport. I've been putting it off just due to life being busy and due to my own general procrastination and laziness. And I have been toying with the idea of choosing the X gender marker. Again, not because I'm scared for the right-wing people who are going to see that as some sort of invalid thing or a threat or whatever nonsense is being preached these days. It was because I was like, I don't know if I'm non-binary enough to check the X gender marker. And in seeing the legislation this week, I'm like, oh no, did my indecisive nature prevent me from being able to take a step that I was gearing up and getting ready to take? Like, is that no longer an option for me? And I think as I realized this, as I was coming to terms with this possibility and probable reality, it occurred to me that a lot of the transphobic and homophobic legislation that's being advocated for, in addition to the way that it is targeting queer and trans people and denying them basic human rights and denying them the ability to be themselves, for those of us who have yet to fully claim or sort through some of it, to fully figure out exactly what our path is meant to be and what feels right, it's now making it that much more difficult to do that in general, but especially at our own pace. And that's so sad to me, because I think the beauty of the queer experience is that everybody's journey is unique. And it doesn't have to look like other people's journeys. It's supposed to be something that is personal and that you have your own agency and autonomy in. And with the current state of the country and the way that it seems to continue to be going, I feel like that journey is becoming a battle. And it's a battle with society, but it's also a battle with yourself. Because I think when you are forced to make a decision quicker than your mind, your body, your heart is ready to do it, when you don't feel like you have agency in your own journey and your own path, then it starts to make you feel shame. It starts to make you feel like, I'm broken, I don't fit in, why can't I get this as fast as anybody else? And I have spent the past, almost 4 years since I started having these conversations with myself, trying to lean into grace and understand that everybody moves at their own pace. And so I've started to, both in my own journey, embrace that, but then also, because I've opened myself up to being in this space where these conversations are happening, other people have reached out to me and kind of talked to me about their own journey, and I'm trying to be very affirming and validating and emboldening for them as well. But right now it just, more and more, it feels like the world is so against giving us the space to have these conversations with ourselves and find who we're supposed to be on our own timeline. Even though I've engaged with these conversations and even though I've shared things about myself, so much of my journey I have kind of, I've kept to me. There's still aspects of it that are just for me. And I'm kind of reaching a point where, because there's such a need for queer and trans storytelling, and I am a writer, I'm kind of feeling like there's less and less space for me to keep those vulnerable parts to myself, because I think it's almost more important for more people to understand that there's other people who are going through some of these things. Because I think there's a stigma around insecurity. And I'm saying this out loud. It doesn't mean I fully believe it, but I think sometimes you have to just speak it out in order for it to get up to your brain so that you can hear it. Everybody has insecurities about things. And I feel like it's actually more humbling and humanizing to have the conversation about the things that we're insecure about. Because insecurities are kind of something that we're made to feel shame about. And I feel like every time someone shares an insecurity with me that they have, that I have as well, it just immediately connects me to that person. And I think we need connection and empathy now more than ever. So I would say I identify as gender non-conforming, and it took me a while to even get to that point, again, moving at my own pace. And I think that there's a spectrum to the trans experience and to the non-binary experience and to the gender non-conforming experience. There's a lot of umbrellas on umbrellas on umbrellas. And navigating that space and figuring out like where you fit into that, in so many ways it's fun. I will say, like, there is so much joy and gender euphoria to be found in that journey. But at the same time, feeling like you still haven't found who you're supposed to be, what feels right, like finding so many things that don't fit. I think there's a lot of focus on checking boxes and how important it is to feel like you have a label, you have a name, you have a pronoun, you have a look that makes you feel like who you are. But I think so much of the queer experience is not seeing yourself in other people. Whether it's, the heteronormative, the straight community, the cisgender community, and feeling that, dysphoria. But it's also meeting and interacting with other queer and trans people and being like, but that's not me. It's like that metaphor, like when a sculptor is making a statue and what you're doing is you're just like chipping away at the parts that aren't the final figure. I think that's so much of what the queer experience is, chipping those parts away of, well, that's not me. I don't identify with this. That's not really my look. That's not that thing. And I think so much of the experience is that, so that when you have those Ring of Keys moments where you do see yourself in somebody, that's why it feels so much more amazing, because I would feel like, probably 80% of the time, it's the chipping away at the parts that don't feel right. And I don't think there's enough conversation about that. I feel like there's so much isolation and shame when you feel like you don't fit into whatever the mold is. But that's what the main experience is. Like, if we're being honest, the majority of the time is I'm not seeing myself in this person, in this experience. And one of the recent bits of media that reminded me of this was the scene in the A League of Their Own series when Max meets Birdie for the first time. Because when Max was hearing stories about who she thought of as her Aunt Birdie, I think that she started to sense that there might be a queer kinship there. And so she goes to what she assumes is her aunt's house and is greeted by not her aunt, but a different woman. But, of course it's a woman, so she's like, okay, maybe I'm right about this. But then Birdie comes down the stairs looking very, like mask presenting and gender non-conforming. And it throws her, and she ends up kind of like running away. People are quick to jump to, oh, that was rude, oh, that was mean, like, why did she do that? But I feel like it speaks to that notion of she thought she was going to connect with somebody, and what she was presented with was somebody who did not look the way she thought that they were going to look, the way that she wanted them to look. I recorded myself watching that scene, so that video is on my computer somewhere, and I might share it at some point. But I was watching that scene and I was feeling this like wholesome queer kinship connection moment when Max saw Birdie for the first time, because I thought that she was going to embrace him and they were going to immediately like kick off this new sort of mentor-mentee queerness, and I was looking forward to it. But then she ran away, and I had this moment where I almost was like, that makes sense. It wasn't like I was mad at her. I was just like, she's not ready yet. She's still claiming this part of herself. And I think that in particular, I'm going to geek out about A League of Their Own for a second. I feel like Max's journey and Carson's journey actually is a lot about not seeing themselves in the people that are around them and trying to figure out where they fit into it, which is why the two of them kind of have their own queer kinship as they're discussing that.
I went to this bar and there were all these tougher, like sort of manly. And then there was like the total opposite. And I just kept thinking, like, I don't know if I'm any or one or the other. I just don't know exactly where I belong.
They're like, we need a new word for us,
Maybe we need a new word for us.
Yes.
And I think there's sort of this beautiful kind of full circle moment in the journey of, Max immediately like runs away, doesn't know how she feels about Birdie, but then as she begins to embrace the fact that Birdie is now in her life and she has this queer kinship, somebody who is also dealing with like gender stuff and presentation and exploration and expression and all of that in a way that Max can also relate to, because, you know, she also goes through her own sort of like mask presentation play in it. And one of the moments that I really loved, I loved so many moments in this show, and particularly in Max's storyline, I very much resonate with Max. But the scene where Max shows up at Birdie's party wearing the suit that Birdie, I think, made for her, or at least got for her, but she's wearing it in a way that feels more like her. So she's not wearing the entirety of the suit. She's wearing like the vest part. They have a conversation about, you know, Max being like, this is what feels like me.
You know, for a long time, I felt like I had to be my mama. And part of me is, but a lot of me isn't. And now I can't talk to her. I don't want to go through that again with you. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Hell, I love it. But this is how I wanted to wear it.
And I think Max is embracing this notion that every queer person, like, their journey is unique, and the way that they want to present themselves to the world doesn't have to reflect exactly what they see in other people. And this is why queer media and queer storytelling matters, because I'm continuing to find bits of myself and bits of my experience in all these different queer characters. And even though what I'm doing is I am kind of steadily chipping away at the bits that don't feel like me, because I'm seeing these glimpses of me in the other places, it's encouraging me and emboldening me to keep going on that journey. I love that I'm smiling right now, because I love that there is still joy and euphoria to be found in this experience, even though the world is telling us that we're wrong, that we don't belong here, that we shouldn't be who we are, that our journeys are a sin, or, you know, whatever. I'm just talking about it, and I'm getting excited as I'm thinking about these stories. So they have not taken away my joy and my hope. I am still empowered in that space, and that feels amazing. And that's also why I hope I can keep continuing to create these videos and to keep these conversations going, because I feel like conversation is key. Being able to discuss these things and talk about our experiences and find those connection points with each other, or chip away at the parts that don't feel like us. And I think too, and this goes back to the original conversation that I had about Jagged Little Pill and Joe, which is one of the most frustrating things to me about a lot of different things, is this notion that if someone is feeling validated by something in their journey, it doesn't invalidate someone else's journey. The whole conversation that the TERFs have, you know, in that, like, if trans women are valid, then it invalidates cis womanhood. They would never use the term cis womanhood, but, like, why can't the umbrella just be bigger? Why does it have to be such a small segment of the population who gets to feel real and valid? Like, why can't we expand that to more people? And that's why it's so important to allow people to move at their own pace, to be able to figure out where in this vast spectrum of identity they belong, so they don't feel like they're being shoved into some spot prematurely, or because they have to, because of society, because of whatever. You know, I can't wrap my head around why people have an issue with people trying to better understand who they are. They're literally hurting no one, you know, and I don't know. It's just the bubble I live in, I guess, that I just can't process that. But yeah, so I just wanted to share some of my current insecurities and concerns with you guys, because I want you to know that as we are heading into some really uncertain times where you may find yourself pressured, even forced to make a decision or claim something about yourself that doesn't feel authentic, for safety, for security, for just your own sanity. So if you feel like there are certain aspects of the journey that you wish you could take more time with, I want you to know that I feel that too. And even if you are denied certain things, you are denied the ability to live as your authentic self in some way or another. There are people who live in parts of the country and parts of the world who can secretly be who they are, but in public, it's not safe to do that. And it doesn't make you any less queer. It doesn't make you any less trans. If you have to present yourself to the world in a way that is more heteronormative, that is more cisgender passing, I see you. I'm sorry that the world doesn't and can't right now, but I encourage you to find community. Also, please be safe. Please do what you have to continue to stay alive, which seems like such a crazy thing to say in 2025, but I am genuinely concerned for the state of our world right now and the fate of the queer and trans community. I hope that you do not feel shame if you have to hide parts of yourself and limit parts of your journey in order to continue to live. And I guess the note I want to end on is this. We still exist. Throughout history, queer and trans people have had to go underground and had to commune in secret for long periods of time. And even if that ends up being the way that our world is heading, we still exist. And there will still be spaces and community where you can feel free to be yourself, where you can have those conversations and express yourself and the beautiful, wonderful mess of a person that you are. And I am hopeful that queer and trans media will also still be around, that art will continue to be made, continue to open people's minds and hearts and tell our stories. And I'm really hoping that this video feels overdramatic and that we're actually fine over the next 4 years. But I genuinely just do not know that that is going to be the case. And I felt compelled to talk about it. So if you are still figuring yourself out, please continue down that journey in whatever way feels comfortable and safe to you, because, you know, even as legislation threatens my very existence, I reached a point where I was able to discard the perception of others because I understood who I am and my own valid identity. I wore this shirt on purpose today for this video. And I know it's kind of silly, you know, it's Barbie, but if you haven't seen Barbie, it is a great movie. But I feel like the movie itself had this kind of queer energy to it, that a lot of it was just kind of an undercurrent, you know, it wasn't necessarily canon, but I like that we're in an age right now where you can find queerness in so many stories and in so many mainstream spaces. In some ways, it harkens back to the age of time where things were queer-coded, and you can just find your queerness in something, even if it's not there. And I feel like when I first heard the term knuff, it was marketed in so many different ways because it's just, you know, this little portmanteau. But I kind of claimed it for myself as a way of honoring my mask of center identity and my gender journey, and this notion of like, you are knuff, as like, you don't have to identify with Barbie. If you identify more with Ken, that's fine too. You are knuff, you know, similar to the figuring things out, having not it all figured out just yet. Yeah, so I guess my message to you, if you are figuring things out, is that you are knuff. Please do not let anybody ever tell you that you are not. We're going to get through this time. Keep telling stories. Keep creating. Keep supporting queer and trans media in whatever way you can. We need as much of it as we can get right now. I guess I'll do an outro. If you like this video, which I hope you did, because it's very on brand with everything else I have on here. I am hoping that this can be more just of, you know, media reviews and analysis and things and just general geeky arts nerdiness. But if you like this video, please like it. And I'm going to say something I haven't said on the other videos, which is please share it. I have a pretty small platform and I'm not really good at self-promotion, but I do really believe in the things that I'm talking about, and I want to spread that message of positivity and hope and empathy and the importance of conversation and all of that, but I can't do it alone. So if this video resonated with you, please share it with other people as far and wide as you want to. I would love to be a part of a conversation around this stuff that I just feel like people aren't talking about enough. I feel like there's not enough dialogue around some of the messier, undefined parts of all these things that are happening. So please like, share, and comment, if there's something that you want to share about your own story or questions that you might have about any of the things I've talked about in this. Obviously, I enjoy these conversations, so please engage in the comment section. Last but not least, if you really like this video and you're like, wow, this person is really smart and insightful, and maybe I should listen to more things that they say, you can subscribe. There's a little subscribe button, and you can watch my other videos on here and share those as well. Yeah. I hope I get to keep doing this at a steady, consistent pace because, honestly, selfishly, I think I need it. I need to know that there are people out there that still care about these things and want to engage in these kinds of conversations, and even if it means that I have to be the one creating the space for that, I kind of took that on when I first started this channel, and I am committed to continuing that charge. So, yeah, feel free to subscribe, follow me, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Anyway, you should go see Wicked. It is really good, and I did record a video, but yeah, and definitely watch A League of Their Own if you haven't seen it. Cannot more highly recommend that one. It's like A League of Their Own and Heartstopper, probably the two best queer series that I've gotten to consume, and both of them have had me crying watching these characters figuring themselves out, and how that helps me better see, things that I've been going through, and it validates certain things about my own queer journey.